Hello, you multi. Manacle Monblythe Malt Monsters, yes. And thank you to Drifterman319 for that malt mention. Welcome, all you whisky curious, Maltmate regulars, Pat Pals, it's my Patreon followers, and anybody else who is having a bit of an internet deep dive into appreciating quality spirits, in particular Scotch single malt whiskies. This is what my channel specialises in. What I do is just bring my experience around whisky, which goes back to the mid-1980s, along with the knowledge that I've built up connecting in the early days with the industry, with professionals working in the industry, well, the ones that were prepared to tell me the truth. And that tends to be the ordinary working folk, the people that have the practical jobs. And I would meet them in the pub, and they'd be having a drink, and I'd be having a drink, and they'd notice that I was taking my time with the single malts. I was respecting the single malt. And that meant a lot to these people, because their jobs were about Scotch single malt whisky. And they understood the importance of whisky culture to a positive Scottish identity and to the Scottish well-being of the economy. And so much has changed since the mid-1980s. And one of my primary missions, and I'm going to cover this, my mission statement, in a future extras, but one of my primary missions is to give you the benefit of my experience in the form of individual reviews of specific single malts or other quality spirits. It could be rum, bourbon, rye, mezcal, whatever, but mainly Scotch whisky. And just to help you really get to grips with how fantastic an experience it can be if you're patient and if you're self-disciplined in not guzzling just to get pished. This is important. I'm going to pour a glass of this. That's my little intro over. I'll have another little intro later in another video. This is Glenfarclas 15-year-old single malt whisky. It's a Speyside region whisky, because Scotland's divided into regions which reflect the characteristics, the primary characteristics of a signature of a whisky, whether it be light, dry, sweeter, more phenolic, more complex, more malt driven. And although Glenfarclas is a Speyside distillery, it will say in the front label Highland. It does that to confuse you. Simple as that. Glenfarclas are not alone. There are other distilleries in Speyside who state that they are Highland whiskies. Macallan being obviously a very notable other example. And the reason they give, the excuse that they give for doing this is that in fact Speyside is a sub-region of the Highlands. And Speyside is located in the Highlands. Don't take all this too seriously. Just don't. Don't buy into all the ash raking that goes on over minute details of this and that. Because Scotch whisky's full of it. It really is. All we need to know is that they like to confuse us with descriptors like it's Highland whisky from Speyside. It's a blended malt whisky, not a blended Scotch whisky, but a blended malt whisky is a blended Scotch whisky. That's another wonderful classic confusion tactic. And of course, another confusion tactic is that it's fine and rare and terribly, terribly difficult to make. Whisky is not difficult to make. It's a very simple process. Scotch whisky is remarkably simple. And the the results, the quality of the results, are not in the master talent person that makes it. It's actually just down to the basics of the quality of the ingredients used. It's like baking a cake. Do you use poor quality flour or do you use good quality flour? Do you cook your cake in the oven properly, in a way that works, or do you just kind of whip it in and whip it out just when you think it might be ready? It's easy to make bad whiskey, and you will find bad whiskey out there. So just don't buy in to all of the, it's not even marketing flannel. We're beyond that now. It's cultural flannel. Another classic example is the use of Gaelic names, which you have no chance of being able to pronounce. The producers can't even pronounce them themselves. And sometimes when they do, they get it wrong. And it's a real Gaelic speaker that will pick it out, and then they'll challenge them about it, and then they'll start spitting the dummy and throwing their toys out the pram because they've been rumbled. This is it's cultural, it's British culture. This is what you're dealing with. And when it's good, by the way, it's great, but when it's bad, it's truly awful. It's absolutely mind-numbingly embarrassing. But here, I'm sticking to the good side. This is a Jedi malt, not a Sith malt. Glenfarclas 15-year-old is the one whisky in the standard range which is actually bottled at 46%, which is why I'm reviewing it for you. It says in the back of the label, natural colour. It doesn't say if it's unchill filtered. However, yesterday I actually didn't finish the whisky I was tasting and preparing for this review. I left some of it in the glass. I put it in the fridge overnight, brought it out a few hours ago to come up to room temperature, and I'm sure you can clearly see, particularly when I show the first poured glass, there's clear signs of some Scotch mist in this glass, which of course are the solid particulates, which are always, without exception, whisky fans, without exception, the sign of a better quality delivery of the whisky. This is a conversation I'm having on my Patreon channel at the moment with subscribers, and I just recently loaded a video where a Scotch whisky industry professional, right, declares that chill filtering removes flavour. Yes, it does. There's no mystique, there's no mystery. This isn't really an opinion, it's actually an established fact. And so I tend to gravitate towards whiskies that are non-chill filtered and natural colour, because you're going to get a better result whatever the circumstances. And a word of warning, by the way, see with Glenfarclas, they've got quite an extensive range from the non-age statement heritage through the 8, 10, 12, 21, 25 and 30-year-old. And there's also a 40-year-old out there somewhere. But by and large, they're all bottled at either 40 or 43%. Now, this means that the entire range, apart from this one, is effectively being chill filtered. And the reason the distillery does this is to have greater reach into the market, to be able to present a flavoursome whisky which isn't going to frighten lazy palates of the occasional buyers who are not really used to whisky. And there's plenty out there. However, things are changing, and it wouldn't surprise me following the success of the Family Cask series, which is a unique situation for Glenfarclas, being a private family-owned company still. That is that they've been able to put out a considerable series of annual releases of their whisky by year, which amongst them have some of Scotch whisky, single malt whisky's finest moments ever bottled, that the people that can afford them, that are drinking them, that actually know about whisky, are scoring and rating very, very highly. And one reason for that, by the way, just before I start to taste this whisky and smell it and tell you all about it, is because they direct fire the stills. So it's all very well me sitting here giving you a few tasting notes and giving you a malt mark and then calling it a day. I could do that in 5 minutes, but there's more information that you need to know to help understand why a whisky is the way it is. And very important with Glenfarclas is that rich, dried fruit flavour. It used to be a little bit more camphorish and medicinal than it is now. It's become a little bit more simpler, but it's still a pleasant, good quality single malt whisky in my opinion. And one reason for that is they direct fire all their stills, both the wash stills and the spirit stills. And in doing so, they get a richer, more toasted, caramelised, new make spirit. Now, I know for a fact that there was a time when they experimented with steam coil stills at Glenfarclas and then found out quite rapidly that it wasn't working for them. So they're one of the few distilleries in Scotland who direct fire the still. The only problem they have now is their gas bills. Cheers. How's the nose? Creamy, malt-led, malt-rich, very space-hiding character. Dried fruits, fig, mild nuttiness mixed with spices, clove, cardamom, cinnamon, that kind of range of spices, allspice, some dark spices. There's a mild chocolatey note interwoven in there as well. It's almost a mocha chocolate. It's very approachable. It's not a complex single malt. It's actually a remarkably simple single malt. But they've done it really well because they're direct firing the stills and they operate the stills manually, and that most certainly helps because you don't get the loss of character that you find with automated production. Taste. Dried fruit, plum notes. Very slight mintiness running through it. It is not as camphorish as it used to be. I'm noticing different casks at play here, but I can tell you right now, these are good, decent quality casks. The price for this, by the way, certainly in the UK, is very competitive, and as a standard, approachable, available and affordable single malt, I'm recommending this to you. It is relatively consistent, not totally consistent, relatively consistent, and it's decent. Of all the whiskies, this is the 15-year-old is what I would place first, followed by the 12-year-old, which is bottled at 43%. So to a certain extent has been chill filtered. Yeah, it has been chill filtered. The problem you'll have now with the 21, the 25 and the 30-year-old Glenfarclas as the standard bottlings is they're bottled at 43%. They're chill filtered, which is just an absolute crime against whiskies of that age. And it used to be you could overrule that because of the very friendly prices that Glenfarclas had been charging a few years ago. But all that's changed now. Prices have really jumped up. So I really don't recommend these. I don't recommend any whiskey over 21 years old that's not bottled at 46%. Maybe 45, maybe 44, depending on the cask, particularly from independent bottlers. But official bottlings, if they're old whiskey when it's chill filtered, destroys it. It really wrecks it. So be warned and beware. I've added a wee drop of water. Brings out the fruit notes. A little bit of apple coming through now and pear. Poached pears. Some russet apples. A little bit of twigginess. I was going to say peatiness, but it's not quite full range peat. It's more a sort of fireside ash wood smoke note. Much longer arrival. Simple, decent arrival. Now we're getting a wee bit more medicinal notes coming through. Good long development. Nice, calm, subdued, gentle but flavoursome finish. And the results are excellent, particularly for the price you're paying. So let's give this a malt mark. Just to let you know, I've reviewed the 15-year-old 3 times now over the last 14 years. The first one was in Ralphie Review 201 back in May 2011, where I rated this whisky very highly. I gave it 90 out of 100, and that was really down to the calibre of the casks. I reviewed it again in Ralphie Review 543, which was July 2015. But that was a cask version that had been bought by an online retailer. So when you're taking a decent malt and bottling it at full cask strength, it elevates the whole experience considerably. So that's another 90 out of 100. However, with the passing of time, with me getting a more experienced palate and a fussier palate, because that's what happens, by the time we reach Ralphie Review 753 in November 2018, the marks dropped quite a bit to 83 out of 100. Well, I'm pleased to say we're recovering a little bit of ground here. I'm going to give it 84 out of 100. If you were to say, hey Ralphie, tell us that in old marks, it would be 87, 86, 87. But I'm bringing the marks down because, to be honest, I think in hindsight, I'm just getting too generous, and there's this. I'm noticing this thing online, where the extended fan club of whisky, the growing community of whisky, to keep in with the positivity and endorsement of all the things that connect us, the whisky that connects us all, is just to overvalue our ratings. So there you have it. I'm just giving my opinion, and I still can. So Malt Mark, thank you for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, leave a comment, click likey. I scan through the comments, leave a wee heart. And in my next review, Ralphie Review 981 Extras, I'm going to be talking about my drinking habits. Because I'm just telling you right now, we've all got our drinking habits. And the secret of success with drinking habits is not letting our habit become too habitual. It's got to be done.